Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be diving into the new palette from Pat McGrath. This is her holiday palette. This is limited edition and this is called her Celestial Odyssey Palette. This is her Mothership Mega Palette. Now, this palette is a little bit different than her traditional Mothership palettes. There are some differences between these limited edition holiday palettes versus the Mothership palettes. They have her Astral Blitz shadows that are extremely unique, and those are all in her Mothership palettes, which makes them a little bit more money. Plus, those shadows are all made in Italy. This is made in the United States. That does not mean that this palette, these limited edition palettes, are not good quality. It just means that this is more of a regular traditional palette versus having these super special explosive shades. In full disclosure, last year I was not a super fan of the holiday palette for multiple reasons, which I will get into that in my final thoughts and kind of share the differences between this palette and last year's holiday palette. But in this video, I create 3 eyeshadow looks, and I also will do a lot of swatches of this palette next to other palettes that I find that might be similar. I don't know that I have these particular shades in one palette, but if I find a color story that kind of has the same type of tones and stuff, I will definitely do a lot of comparisons. Because the palette is $78, I like to give a lot of comparisons so that the audience and the viewers can decide if this is something that they want to get in their collection. But again, be mindful that this is limited edition. Now, in the holiday collection, she also launched a beautiful highlighter, 2 different like face palettes, and they have 2 blushes and a highlighter. And she also launched 2 new quads, which I'm super excited to get those. I have ordered both of the blush palettes and the highlighter and the quads. The reason why I went ahead and decided to buy the blushes is because the only shade that I have that are in those palettes is the Divine Rose. So it kind of made sense. I've really enjoyed her blushes. So I went ahead and got both palettes. So as soon as those arrive, I will definitely do a full review on both of the quads and both of the face palettes, and of course that beautiful highlighter I'm so excited about. So for now, we're going to keep it all about the palette. Let's go ahead and jump into the 3 eyeshadow looks that I created using this palette. And then we will get into the swatches. And then of course I will get into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. So let's go ahead and dive into the new palette from Pat McGrath. This is how she looks. I don't even know what looks I'm going to create. Kind of just sticking my fingers in just to kind of like get to know the shadows a little bit more and kind of like figure out, oh my gosh, that blue right there. Look at that blue. Oh, it's so pretty. It kind of looks kind of more green in the pan, but then wow, look how beautiful that is. That turquoise is like poppy. Look at that green. That green is so pretty, right? I don't know if you guys are like me, but whenever I'm deciding like what look I want to do, I always kind of pick the shimmer shade that I want to use and then kind of build around that. Am I the only one that does that? So I'm going to grab the Smith 253 brush. I want to go into this olive green shade right here. And I'm just going to place this on my lid and kind of bring it up and into the crease. I always love bringing shimmer shadows up in the crease. I feel like with my eye shape, especially being so deep set, that bringing it up and into the crease kind of opens up my eye. It's got a lot of pigment and it's really a beautiful shade, isn't it? Gosh, that's a pretty shade. So pretty. Now I'm going to grab the A504. This is from BK Beauty and Angie from Hot and Flashy. It's their collaboration brush. I'm going to grab this. You know what? I think I'm going to go directly into this matte right here. Yes, it's a little bit darker, but I'm going to kind of go in slowly and kind of build it because I really like the tone of this with that shade. So it's a little bit more, whoa, y'all. It's a little bit more on the cool tone side. And I always like using a cool tone matte when it comes to these gray tones. So I'm going to slowly kind of blend that into this crease, and it's got a lot of pigment. So I'm going to wipe my brush off because that is a lot of pigment, y'all. And I'm just going to keep blending until I get that to blend. And that blended out pretty good, didn't it? For as much pigment as I had there on that crease, wow, that blended out good. Woo! I was a little bit concerned. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, I went in ham, a little in over my head, but that actually worked out pretty good. Now I am getting a little bit of fallout, so kind of keep that in mind. I don't have any concealer on, so I am able to wipe it off. I'm going to take a small smudge brush and just add a tiny bit of definition out here, just to give some of that depth. Okay, so I went ahead and threw on a little bit of concealer. I'm going to move on to the lower lash line. I'm going to take a small smudge brush. This is the BK Beauty 204. And I'm going to go into that matte. I am going to place a lot of that pigment like right here on the outer corner. Then slowly kind of bring a little bit of it into the inner corner. But keeping a lot of that product out here. I don't really want to blow it out too far. But this shade has a lot of pigment. I'm actually using the Wayne Goss number 7. It's a little bit more of like a feather type where you can really add pigment but also really get a good grip on it to blend it. And because that shade is so dark and I use that as the shade, it's got a lot of pigment. So you just have to be really careful with that shade because it's extremely pigmented. And sometimes I struggle with Pat McGrath's mattes. I'm not going to lie, like it just is what it is. She has incredible mattes, but they're so pigmented that sometimes I struggle with them. These two shades together are so beautiful and they really complement each other so well. Next, I'm going to grab the flat definer from Sonia G and I'm going to go into this shade right here. This palette is so heavy, much heavier than last year's. I'm going to place that right here along the center just to really open the eye. I am going to put that up here on the brow bone and also on the inner corner. Okay, so I'm back. I just went ahead and threw on a lash and this is a really beautiful eye look. I think it's just fall appropriate and the shadows just blended really easily. I didn't have any struggles with that matte. This is a really pretty eye look. I just really, really love the way that this turned out. So that's it for look number 1. Let's go ahead and jump into look number 2. Okay, for look number 2, I think this probably, if you guys have been with me for a while, this probably won't be a surprise. I really, really want to see what that peachy shade is. This is a beautiful shade. However, it's a little bit different of a texture. It's a little bit more of like a satin texture. It's not as like shimmery as some of the others. So I'm really curious to see what this shade will look like on the lid. I've wiped off my Smith 253 brush. I'm going to go into that peachy shade and I'm going to place that right here on the lid. Ooh. Okay, so did you guys just hear me say that it's not super shimmery? It's not, but it's super pigmented. So it doesn't have a lot of shimmer, but boy, does it got a lot of pigment and it's got some shifts to it. And this is a very, very, very beautiful shade. It's a little bit more toned down. You know, you can see that the difference in shine between this one and this one. It's a little bit more of a satin shade. It's really beautiful. You guys, this is a really pretty shade. I was not really expecting that, to be honest. I was almost expecting to be a little bit disappointed I love me a peachy shade, but I was a little bit kind of like, oh, I hope this doesn't disappoint me, but it didn't. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful. I am gonna grab the Rephr number 13, another one of my favorite small little crease brushes, and I'm gonna go into this mat right here, and I am going to build that in the crease. Now, if I didn't wanna see what that shade looked like on its own, I probably would have built my crease first. I actually want to grab a little bit of it because it's not as shimmery. It's a little bit more of a satin shimmer. I'm going to pick up a little bit on this brush and I'm going to bring it over top of this brown, kind of bring it up and into this crease. I think I'm going to add maybe just a titch of this brown right here, this brown shimmer. Bring it right here on this outer corner and also kind of bringing it up and into the crease. Now, I did just get a lot of fallout from that shade. Okay, so that shade is so pigmented. It's so pigmented that that little bit that I applied here on the outer corner is dragging all the way out to here, and it's on this brush. So that brown is extremely pigmented. So kind of keep that in mind if you go to use that beautiful shimmer brown. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and clean up. That brown is a mess. Easy to clean up though, so that's a good thing. Some shades are a little bit hard to pick up and clean, but that one cleaned up very nicely. All right, so I went ahead and cleaned up, put a little concealer on. I'm gonna grab that smudge brush, the 204 from BK Beauty, and I'm gonna go into this dark shade right here. And I'm gonna bring that right here on this outer corner on the upper and lower brush. I think I'm gonna grab the A501 from the BK Beauty and Angie collection, and I am gonna dip into this shade right here, and I'm gonna kind of blend out the dark with that matte. I'm gonna go into that shade that I used on the first look, and I'm gonna put that on the inner corner. And I'm also going to bring that on the brow bone. This is the final look for look number 2. This is a really beautiful look. I love the way both of these looks turned out. And that peach shade did not disappoint. And it's very, very pretty. I threw on a lash. It's hanging on by a thread. I'm going to go ahead and pull these lashes off and wipe this off and do one more final look. That's it for look number 2. Let's go ahead and jump into look number 3, which will be the final look. Okay, so now that I've wiped off the first and the second look, let's go ahead and jump into the third and final look. So I'm gonna first start the look off with this really pretty salmon pink color. And I'm just gonna softly kind of bring that into the crease and kind of using it as the base. But again, it's super pigmented because it is Pat McGrath. That actually blended out pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna now grab this warm brown, just a tad. Again, I don't want that brown to overtake the pink, but I wanna kind of mix those two shades together in a very, very soft way. I feel like that warm brown will really make it pop, and it'll just give it some depth. I want to dip into this pink up here and basically using all three of those mattes to kind of create a really pretty base to it. I'm going to grab my Smith 253 and I'm going to go into this pink shade right here. And I am going to apply this on the lid. And you can spread it, like I'm spreading it all into the outer corner. Oh, so pretty, you guys. Dang. So I'm going to take that 253 brush and I'm going to go into this shade right here. Now this shade is a little bit more chunkier. It's got some chunk to it versus the shimmer that I just put down. And I'm going to kind of place that right here on the center just to kind of make it really shine right there. So I'm going to use that BK Beauty 204 and I'm going to go into this shade right here. I'm going to go right at the base of the lashes with this shade. And then kind of connect it to the outer corner. This shade is so pigmented that you can really pack it on to give it to connect to the outer corner. It packs very well. Okay, so I went ahead and threw on some concealer. Now I'm going to kind of just fine tune everything and kind of bring it all together with the lower lash line. So I am going to start with the BK Beauty brush, the 204. And I'm going to start with this shade first, keeping it really, really close to the lower lash line. And I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to grab a smaller blending brush. This is actually the Soft Definer from Sonia G. And I'm going to go into this pink shade right here. Kind of connecting it to the upper lash, but I am going to grab this shade right here. I have a hard time using this brush. This is the Refer number 21 brush. This is a brush that Mel gave the idea to Refer to create, and so they created it because she loved this brush from MAC. If I remember, I think it was from MAC. I'm also putting that on the lid, by the way. But she had this brush from, I think it was MAC, that she absolutely loved. And she asked Refer to create something like that in this shape. And they did. And yeah. Okay, so I am back. I went ahead and finished this. I finished the rest of my makeup, threw on a lash. Right now I'm wearing the House of Lashes in the Iconic Lights. This is the same pair I was wearing in the look number 1 and number 2. I just kind of wanted to jazz it up. I've been not wearing lashes very often, and if I do, they're a little bit more low-key, like naked lashes from Ardell. They've been my favorite, and they still are, but I felt like I just wanted to kind of, I don't know, just put a big pair of lashes on. So these just really brought the whole look together. As far as the lip, I pulled out one of my favorite lippies from last year. This is the Tom Ford. This is the Lip Spark in the shade Extreme. I can't read it. Synthetica, I think is what it is. It's number 19. I didn't pair it with any lip liner. This is all on its own, and it's really, really pretty. So that's it for look number 3. Let's go ahead and jump into the swatches and also comparisons. You guys know that I like to do good swatches and also compared to other palettes that I might find similar in my collection. And then, of course, we will jump into my final thoughts. So I will see you guys then. So I hope that those swatches and comparisons were helpful for you. Let's go ahead and get into my final thoughts about this palette. I want to first start with the differences between this palette and last year's holiday palette. I will be completely honest with you. I was not a super fan of this holiday palette, and I never used it after I reviewed it. I was just really not a fan, and I think it was because I had a very hard time creating looks with this palette. I had a very hard time being creative. Because I'm not super colorful, it's hard for me to really go outside of my box to really create strong eyeshadow looks, like using these strong purples. There was a lot of purples in this palette. And for me, on just a very personal level, it was very hard for me to create looks with this palette. Plus, I will be honest, there was several shades in here I just wasn't a super fan of. And I felt like the mattes were kind of dry and patchy, and I had a hard time blending them and kind of pulling those shadows together to make them work. I can't remember if it was this matte or this matte. I mean, it's been a year ago, but I think it was this matte. Oh, it was either this one or this one, but I think it was this one. It was a little scratchy. I felt like the shimmers in this palette was good, but overall, I just did not feel like I was going to use this palette, and I didn't. Now, how does that compare to this year's? Well, first of all, I can say right off the bat that I actually really like, I'm not a big fan of the red, but I'm never a fan of red. I just am not. But I really like the layout of this new palette versus the old palette or last year's palette because of this. This kind of gives me a little bit more of a luxury vibe, and the other palette kind of felt like a Morphe palette to me, and that's going to sound crazy. All of you Pat McGrath lovers out there, don't try to smack me through the camera, but last year's palette kind of just felt a little bit cheap to me. I kind of felt like it gave me that Morphe palette vibe, or like a BH Cosmetics palette vibe. I did not really feel like this was luxury at all. If you look at these two palettes side by side, like if I hold them up, this one looks so much more luxurious, doesn't it? And I think it's also because like this palette comes, like there's no casing around it. Like this one has the red kind of comes up and around, and it kind of feels like it's sitting down inside. Versus this one just kind of opens up, and it just felt like a Morphe palette. I mean, this is what a Morphe palette looks like, right? So she has this shiny piece to it, and it kind of gives me that mothership vibe. Plus, we have the little Pat McGrath logo right here, which also just gives it a little bit more of that luxury feeling to it. Versus last year's. I was just very disappointed in last year's. And this feels heavier, but it is also thicker. So if you put them side by side, you can clearly see that this new one is much thicker than last year's. So overall, I feel like this year's is exactly what I would expect from a Pat McGrath holiday palette. So if you were disappointed in last year's palette as far as luxury and overall quality of the palette, I think you'll be much happier with this year's. Okay, so how do I feel about the color story? This one feels so much easier for me to use because of the mattes. There's a lot of color in here. I mean, you have some purples, you have some greens, you have some blues, golds, browns, peaches, pinks, like there is a variety of colors in here. Because of the colors that she chose for the mattes, because there's only 4 mattes. Last year there were 3 mattes. This year we have 4 mattes. Because of the colors that she chose for this palette, it pulls it together. It makes it so much user-friendly. It makes it feel like I'm not trying to force it to make it work. Like last year I really struggled. This one, I struggled trying to find out which shade I wanted to use. Last year, I didn't know what to use. So this gives me so much more, inspiration, and I feel so much more comfortable going into it. And I'm actually excited to create more looks with it. I will definitely reach for this palette. Definitely. Last year's, no, but this year's 100%. Even touching these shimmers and the overall quality of them, this is what you expect from a luxury brand like Pat McGrath. And even though this is not her mothership is really, really beautiful. I mean, she did a fantastic job putting these shadows together. I feel like the color story overall is just so user-friendly. I really, really enjoy it. Well done. This palette, in my opinion, 5 out of a 5. I can't think of anything negative to say. Because there's so many shadows in this palette, I might do another video with several looks in it, just because I really enjoyed creating looks with this palette. And I'm very, very impressed. Like, this is a good quality $78 palette that if those of you out there, you know, just cannot spend the $125 on a mothership palette, this is a great way to enjoy a Pat McGrath quality product. She did a fantastic job, and I am so excited for the blush palettes and the highlighter and the quads. Oh my gosh, I cannot wait. So that's it for the review, you guys. Sound off down below in the comment section. Let us know how you are feeling about this palette. I'm sure many of you guys have already ordered it. Have you received it? Are you loving it? Sound off down below in the comment section. Let us know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in today's video. I hope you guys all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in my next video. Love you. Bye.